Welcome back, legends. I hope you're all fantastic. Today's video is the first in a series where we're going to learn the Helix Stadium inside out. I really want to deep dive into specific functions and use cases for the Stadium. And on today's video, I want to show you how you can use the Stadium as a guitar and bass processor at the same time. So being able to take a single Stadium and use it for a gig to process the guitar player's tones and the bass player's tones. Before we get started, here's a fun little track that I've put together using some of the sounds that we're going to dial in with today's preset. Later in the video, I will show you how I'm actually switching between all of these sounds once we've dialed them in. But for now, let's make some noise. Let's get started with the guitar tones. The first thing that I want to do is assign my inputs and outputs. I have my guitar plugged into instrument input number 1, and over here in the top left, I'm going to make sure that that is set to instrument number 1. Over on the output side of this row, I'm going to set this to the XLR direct outputs, and I'm just taking a pair of XLR cables to my audio interface. There's no post-processing on the guitars here. On the bottom row, we're going to use that for the bass. So my bass is plugged into instrument number 2. I'm going to select that over here, and this is going to go to the 1/4" direct outputs. We'll get onto the bass side of the chain later in the video, or you can just skip to it using the timestamps in the video description. But now we've got our core functionality happening where we've got parallel guitar and bass processing lanes. Let's rip straight in, and I want to get the amp and cab tones sorted. I'm going to go to my favorites, because one thing that I love about the Helix is you can save your favorite settings and give them custom names. So I'm going to do this 2203 amp model and pair it up with my free cab IR. The free cab IR is also linked in the video description. Let's just have a listen to what this sounds like, and I'll let you see the settings in the amp block. It's the high channel of the Agora 2203. Sounds pretty good with the Les Paul. Very nice indeed. You'll also notice in that cab block that I've got the low cut at 80 Hz and the high cut at 8 kHz. I might revisit that a little bit later in the video, but let's keep building from here. I'm going to use the favorite section for the end of chain effects as well. First thing I want to add is a little bit of plate reverb, and I have my favorite plate reverb settings saved in here. I'm pretty sure this is the dynamic plate, 2 seconds of reverb, 10 milliseconds of pre-delay, mix at 20%. And I've got my guitars in stereo, so I'm going to add some glorious micro pitch to the end of this. The way I've done this, and I do this in basically every video I do with the Helix Stadium, so for anyone who's going to ask, the intervals on here are set to 0, so it's not doing any coarse pitch shifting, but I have the Sense 1 and Sense 2 set to +9 and -9 respectively. There's some very short delays on each voice, and I have the overall mix at 25%. You'll also see that I've panned each voice hard left and hard right, and the dry signal is down the center. These are going to be always on blocks. Let's have a listen to what they sound like. to add a little bit of depth and the micro pitch to add a little bit of width. If I was playing in mono, I'd probably just take the micro pitch out of there, but life's too short to play in mono, especially when you've got all these inputs and outputs available. My core rhythm tone on here, I think I want a little bit more juice out of that 2203. And to do that, I'm going to boost it. So let's go to the distortion section, and we're going to use this Stupor OD based on the little Yellow Boss Super Overdrive. We'll go for the drive quite low. I will crank the level all the way up, and let's put the tone around 7. This is not only going to add gain, it's going to add a little bit of a mid boost, and it's just going to filter out a little bit more low end from the front of the amp. You'll notice a little bit of hiss. Of course, I'm running an overdrive into a crunchy amp. We can tame that using the input block noise gate. You'll notice if I click on this over here, there is the option down here to turn the gate on. I find the stock settings are pretty good, but I'm going to just move the threshold down to around -55, and we'll go for the decay maybe around 40 or 50 milliseconds on there, just so it's a little bit tighter. A few things that I like when I'm playing rock guitar are guitar solo cheat codes, and the first one of those is having a wah pedal at the start of the chain. So let's go to the wah and filter section. There's a lot of different wah models in here. I'm just going to go with the Facile wah. I'm guessing this is based off an old Crybaby. We want to assign this to the expression pedal. To do that, we're going to come up here and we're going to right click on the bypass. I'm going to assign the bypass to a controller. I'm going to set it to the toe switch of the expression pedal, and we can have this set up either latching or momentary. I want to use it like a classic wah, which has a latching foot switch, so that is going to be good to go. From there, I want to assign the position parameter to the expression pedal. So we will right click that, assign it to the controller. I'm going to go with the expression pedal. Now, if I engage that toe switch, it will kick the block in. However, I want to be able to move the pedal and have the position parameter change. So I'm going to assign the position to a controller. Now, when I press down on the toe switch, it will engage the block. The next part of this is I want to do a similar process for the position parameter. We'll right click it, assign it to a controller, and I'm going to assign it to expression pedal number 1. Check this out. Now, when I move the pedal, the position of the wah will move. When I press in the toe switch, it will bypass the block. So I'm able to free up a foot switch on the Stadium and engage the wah the way I would a classic Crybaby. My second favorite guitar solo cheat code is adding some delay. So let's add, from my favorites, the dual delay block. This is using the dual delay, as you would imagine, and a pretty classic setup over here. I've got a quarter note subdivision on the left channel, a dotted eighth note subdivision on the right channel. I've dialed in plenty of feedback because I want this quite wet. The mix is at 35%, and I've gone pretty heavy with the high cut. It's at 3.3 kilohertz. Let's have a listen to what this sounds like now. I'm going to add 2 more blocks to this in front of the drive and the amp. I want a little bit of wobble. So in my favorites, I've got the Electric Mistress model dialed in here. I've given it the very imaginative name of Electric Mistress. You can see the rate is at 2, range up to 7, color at 6. So there's plenty of depth and feedback, in other words. Let's have a quick listen to that. I've got this set up almost for a vibe style sound. Now, just because I can, and because I want to showcase how much power you can add into a single lane, I'm going to add another reverb. Let's go to the stereo reverbs. I'm actually going to add a dynamic hall, and I'm going to crank up the decay and the mix. So you can see the stock setting, the decay is at 6.3 seconds. I'm going to bring the pre-delay down to about 60 milliseconds. I'll go for the biggest size. Plenty of diffusion, and I'll bring the mix up a little bit on there as well. You heard in that intro track a little ambient intro and outro. What I was using was this dynamic plate running into the dynamic hall. So this is providing all that lovely stereo wash. I also had the SD1 bypassed on there, and I had that dual delay engaged. Let's hear that. To finalize the guitar portion of the signal chain, I'm going to organize this into 4 distinct snapshots. So snapshot number 1 is going to be my main boosted rhythm tone. I want this SD1 on. I want my 2203 at these settings. I want my cab. I don't want the delay on, but I do want the micro pitch and some plate reverb. I'm going to hit save on this preset. We'll save it as a new preset, and I'll give it the name 1 guitar, 2 bass. That reminds me that input 1 is for guitar and input 2 is for bass. Next, I'm going to come up to the little snapshot menu and I'm going to hit these 3 dots here. I'm going to rename this snapshot rhythm. So once I'm happy with that, I can move on to snapshot number 2. Snapshot number 2, I want to have as my lead tone. So I want this delay on. I also want more drive out of my boost section. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click the drive parameter and I'm going to set up snapshot control. This is great because it means I can have a different value for this parameter in every single snapshot. Let's absolutely crank that up. And you know what? I'm going to do the same thing to the drive in the amp block. We'll set up snapshot control for that. I'm going to turn the drive all the way up for snapshot number 2. So I've not only got more drive from the amp, I'm also pushing more drive into it with my distortion. Next thing, I'm going to name this lead. For my 3rd snapshot, I want a wobbly vibe style tone. So I'm going to engage this Electric Mistress model. I don't want quite as much drive though. I'm actually going to take this all the way down below 1. I still want it on for the filtering and tone shaping properties. And I'm going to bypass the delay. I'm going to name this one Wobble. And then for my final snapshot, I want that big dynamic hall reverb. I want the delay on. I want the drive totally bypassed. I want the modulation bypassed. And I actually want a little less drive from the amp. We're going to take that down to 5. Now I can save that one. I'm going to call it Ambient, and I'm done with my guitar. Now that the guitar signal chain and the snapshots are sorted, we're going to dial in a bass tone. And for each of these snapshots, I'm going to add an effect to the bass that reinforces and complements what's happening with the song and the guitar part. So let's start off with a bass amp. There is a very generous selection of bass-specific amp models. If you click on here, you'll get all the Agora bass amps. This Ampeg SVT 50th matching 8x10 cab is going to do the job for me for a core bass tone. Let's just have a listen to that. I'm on the neck and middle pickup of this Fender Bass 6. It's always such a lovely contrast dialing in a bass tone compared to a guitar tone, because most of the time you can take an absolutely classic pairing, leave it at the stock settings, and just play around with the controls on your bass to get the sound. I mean, you could use that and go into a rock gig. It would be totally fine. For this, I would like a little bit more grit, and rather than change the bass amp, what I'm going to do is add a bass distortion. But before that, I'm going to go over to the input block. And again, instrument number 2, this is where the bass is plugged into. I'm going to turn the noise gate on. So let's go over here and add a distortion. If you come down to the bottom of this list, there's some very nice bass specific overdrives. There's a SansAmp model, there's a Royal Bass DI model, but we'll go with the Dark Glass model, the Obsidian 7000. At the stock settings, it's pretty awesome, but I'm just going to take the attack and set it to cut. I'll also boost maybe just a little bit more bass over here. This sounds pretty bunter. Clean blend with that bass distortion is really nice. If you wanted to, you could add a split here and run a parallel clean chain. Let's say you wanted to have a really compressed low DI. You could filter out all the high end from it over here and blend this with your core bass tone. I actually think that combination of the Obsidian drive and the Ampeg with the 8x10 is really appropriate for what I'm doing in this setup. So I'm not going to do that, but just keep in mind you can run those parallel chains for this entire bass preset. What I am going to do to add some glue to all of this is to use the 3-band compressor at the end of the chain. I think these stock settings are generally pretty good for bass guitar. I just play around with the overall low, mid, and high gain. You can see it's adding quite a bit of high end in there. So I'm going to actually bring out a bit of high end. I'll leave the mids pretty close to 0, but you know what? I'll beef up the low end. I'll leave it at 4. Let's have a listen to what this does to the overall texture and tone. Added advantage to using compression or a multiband compressor on the bass guitar is it just makes it a lot easier to play when you're not a native bass player like me. So that's going to pair up great with the core rhythm guitar tone. What I want to do is for each snapshot where the guitar sound is changing, I'm going to change something on the bass guitar as well. This is one of the awesome things about using the Stadium as an integrated guitar and bass workstation. You can automate all this switching. So put it off onto the guitar player, they can switch the snapshots, and then just the bass player can play through, and magically, say on the lead guitar snapshot, you could have an octaver come in and the bass could be louder. Let's go to the start of the chain and add a pitch block. There's a great model of the Boss OC2, which is beloved by bass players. So I'm going to blend the dry level all the way up, and we'll set the sub octave where it is. Let's have a listen to this now. This with the rhythm guitar probably isn't appropriate, but when you're playing a guitar solo, having the bass just add some extra texture underneath it is going to be pretty awesome. It's not the tightest pitch shifter, but it adds character. And we also want to make this louder. So one way I could do that is I could use snapshot control on the amp block output, or I could use an EQ block. Let's use a dedicated EQ. I'm going to go with a mono parametric. And what I will do is I'll come down here and I'll just turn the overall level up by say 3 dB. That will give me a nice boost. But at the same time, I'm actually going to cut out a little bit of the low mid-range and boost a little bit of the high mid-range on there. So let's do this. Let's have our mid frequency here. Let's set this one to say 800 Hertz. And we'll just pull a little bit of that out with the overall level control. And for the high frequency, I've set that to 1.6 kilohertz and I've given that a 3 dB boost. This is going to make the overall attack of the bass guitar a lot louder, but remember I'm adding in that sub octave on there. So this is also sort of compensating for that extra low end as well. On its own, it might sound a little bit brash and abrasive, but we'll hear it in the mix again at the end, and it makes a lot of sense. wobble section, I want the bass to get super funky, and one of the most underrated ways to do this is to use a ring modulator on the bass guitar. So let's go to the mod section over here, and there's this AM ring mod. I'm not going to touch anything, I'll just run it at the stock settings, but I am going to bypass the Octaver and this EQ boost. This is going to sound totally gross on its own, but again, remember the guitar is doing some crazy stuff with that flanger. So we're trying to reinforce that vibe for the section of the song, and this is all totally automated. While we're at it, let's make this section really, really funky and add a filter style effect in here. There's some really cool auto filters like, I don't know, maybe the Mutant filter will do the job. Let's have a listen. That's pretty cool. I might set it as a resonant low pass filter. We'll take the overall gain on there up a little bit. We get this. Again, gross on its own, but it's going to add some great character to that part. For the final sound on here, you know what? I'm going to do something pretty vanilla. I might just leave the Octaver on. We will bypass this funky envelope filter and the ring mod. Might even bypass this Obsidian drive. So we've got a slightly cleaner overall tone. Do I want the EQ on or off? I want it off. And with the Octaver, let's do this. Let's attach snapshot control to the -1 octave on there. So we'll go snapshot control over here, and I want it in there, but I don't think I want quite as much as I had before. So this is going to be quite subtle. Let's have a listen to what this sounds like. The guitar's doing so much in this snapshot with that big ambient reverb that I think it makes sense maybe to scale the bass back a bit. I would like a little bit more to happen though, so maybe let's do this. Let's add a chorus at the end of the chain, something that I think works really great on the bass. And you kind of have to be careful with modulation on bass, especially to the low end, because it can make things a little bit washed out. Let's go for the 4-voice chorus, and I like this because it has a low cut parameter, and I'm going to ride that one up quite high, somewhere around 500 hertz. Let's have a listen to the stock settings on this. I'm actually recording the bass in stereo, so I can make use of some of that stereo width, but having the low cut means the low end should still sound like it's coming out of the middle in mono. I think I prefer this mode with just 2 voices, a slightly lower rate and depth. But again, having control over the low cut and having the ability to add a little bit of a high boost or cut with that high shelf control is awesome for a bass chorus. I've also gone through and organized this into appropriate snapshots. Again, I'm going to check my snapshots. We'll go from number 1, the rhythm snapshot, and click through. So this is the Obsidian drive, the Ampeg SVT model, the 8x10 cab, and a multiband compressor. While the guitar is using the lead scene, there's the Boss OC2 model coming in to thicken up the low end along with this EQ boost. Let's have a listen to that now. Guitar's getting all wobbly. We have this super funky scene with the filter running into the ring modulator. And then finally, while the guitar is doing the big ambient scene, I have a very subtle octave on here, and I've got the Obsidian drive turned off. So it's more of a clean bass sound. I've got a little bit of this two-voice chorus happening too. To finish up this preset, I'm going to come into Command Center and I can assign my snapshots to different foot switches. I'm also going to make use of the foot switches to control individual effects. And I do have to say here, the way I've done this is I've thought of this as a preset per song style setup where each snapshot is dedicated to a particular part of the song. And in doing so, we're syncing up the guitar and the bass changes. You could set this up though to have just the guitar snapshots and then to control the individual effects blocks as you like with the bass. That would be a case of like the bass player controlling the Helix on there and remembering to change the guitar player's snapshots. I think this snapshot synchronization makes the most sense to me because it would give me the most control in a live setting, but there's absolutely no reason why you couldn't totally independently switch each of these effects on and off as you like. But I like the snapshot, so let's do that. We'll go snapshot command over here. We'll have number 1 on foot switch number 1. We'll do a similar thing for foot switch number 2, but I'll go for the second snapshot. You know, nothing too crazy over here. Really easy to assign to these first 4 foot switches. So we'll go for another snapshot over here. And then I've got options over here. I think what I wouldn't mind having along the top are all my individual guitar effects. And what I can do is I can use the capacitive touch switches on there to do that, or I can come back to my effects grid over here. I'm going to right click this overdrive block. We'll assign it to Stomp A number 1. That is going to be the top left foot switch. Similar process for any other effects that I like over here if I want to assign them to different switches. This is going to be fairly straightforward. I will do it in real time though. So my modulation I'll assign to Stomp A3. This is going to populate along the top. Wouldn't mind being able to kick in this big ambient reverb whenever I want to, so I'll assign that again. Stomp A will go A4, and I've got one more. You know what? Every now and then I might have to play mono, so I'll turn the pitch detune on and off with Stomp A5. And I do have a spare one. I think it's going to be this very last Stomp A11. What I'll do is I'll assign a bass effect over there, and let's assign this bass chorus on there because maybe you want bass chorus on everything in the heat of the moment. So we'll assign that to switch A11. And now I've got everything laid out here. I'll play through this and I'll show you how I switch through it in real time for guitar and bass. I really hope you enjoy this video. If you've got suggestions for future videos in this series, please let me know in the comments section below. A big thank you to the team at Line 6 here in Australia for making this video happen. If you want to support what I'm doing on the channel, there's links to my Patreon and the music that I make in the video description. Go grab your guitar now and make a bunch of loud guitar noises, and I'll see you on the next one.